In this step, we're going to make the actual fishing net itself, and there's some materials here to do it. First is tarred nylon twine. This is number 15 twine, and it seems to work pretty good for just about any size fishing net. And then you've got a lighter, which the lighter is really just to kind of melt the ends of the twine so they don't fray, and it also helps with keeping your knot secured. And then we got a couple of different types of measuring sticks here. There's just a ruler, and then there's these two blocks here. These actually determine the size of the mesh, and there's a 1-inch one here, there's a 1 1/4 here. I'm going to use the 1 1/4 for this net, and the mesh itself is actually going to be 2 times the width of this, and again it's a 1 1/4 inch block. And then you got scissors, and then there's this shuttle here, and that's really just a piece of scrap wood that I had that I bandsawed into the shape you see here. There's an opening here, and then there's an opening over here. There's a pointy end here, and then there's a little thin cut in the very tip here. And really what that does is it just allows the twine to come in and out. And really this is pretty essential for doing the fishing net. It just allows you to get in and out of the mesh, and allows you to make the net a lot quicker. And I started to do the fishing net, the very first part. I'm going to zoom in on it so you can see it in more detail. And this is just how I make them. What I start with is 2 small loops. That's this right here. And these loops here are 1 3/4 inch from like this end here to this end here. And I use a bowline to tie the loop, and I just cut back the ends really good, and heat them or melt the ends with the lighter. And the reason for 2 loops is that this being the very start of the net, the very bottom of the net, I don't want this to come apart at all. If this came apart, then the fishing net itself could start to unravel to some extent. So 2 of them is just kind of a little bit of redundancy there. And then what I did was just tie a square knot on both of the loops together on this end here, and that's what goes to my shuttle. So the other part of the start of this is really just a kind of a small size loop here that I made, and just tied it into the inner 2 loops here. And really this is just for using something to loop onto this fixed point here, which is just a clamp that I clamp to this little bench, and really, yeah, it's just a fixed point. It allows you to do things like be able to tension the net, tighten it down, and gives you an extra hand, basically, so. And I don't want to really take these 2 small loops and add try and secure that to the clamp here, because it just doesn't leave enough room to actually work, so just added this little extra loop. It's not part of the net, it's just kind of to help with making the net. So the next step is to do the very first ring around these inner 2 smallest loops. And this again will be the bottom of the net. And one other thing that I did, you can see here, is that I made the 2 knots, the bowline knots, kind of opposite of each other, and then I tied the square knot about as far as I could go away from these other 2 knots. And the reason there is because we're going to make the first loop all the way around this inner loop here. And every time you have a knot here, it just kind of it's going to create a separation in between the first loops. So it doesn't really harm the net at all. It's just kind of a cosmetic thing. So I didn't really want all 3 of these knots to be right next to each other, because there'd be a bigger gap, right? So I just separated them out. So yeah, the first loop, that goes around this, I'm going to make that a half-size mesh. So it's just going to be 1 1/4 inch mesh for the very first loop. Everything after that, the mesh is going to actually be twice this size. But for the first one, we're going to do 1 1/4. And what I do is I go up through the inside of the 2 loops with the shuttle, and then down back through the loop that you just made. So that's the first part of the clove hitch that I'm going to do. And you tighten that down. You put the twine on the back side of the measuring block, and the measuring block, you want to kind of keep that so that it's right at the end of where the inner loops are, so you can keep everything nice and consistent. So you tighten that down, and then what we'll do is we'll do the same thing over again, except I'm not going to loop it around the measuring block. I'm just going to come in between the loop, the inner 2 loops, and then through the loop that I just made. Bring it on the back side of the measuring block, and then tighten it down. Okay, that's the clove hitch, and that's the first inner loop. You can see, it's going to be this width, right? And then what you do is you keep going around this loop, go all the way around. Ideally, you want to have this completely filled with loops, so that it's completely packed and it'll look clean. For the net the landing net that we're working on here, I counted out how many drill holes there were in the hoop part of that landing net. There's 47 of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 47 of these these first outer loops all the way around the perimeter of this inner loop. And I'm going to show this again, just so you guys can kind of see it up closer, how I'm doing this. So you go over the top of the measuring block, and you come up through the inner loop, and then through the loop that you just made, and then pull that tight, and then you do it again, same steps. You go through the inner 2 loops, and then through the loop that you just made, and then tighten it. That's the clove hitch. Okay? You kind of see right now what it's starting to look like. That I've got 3 or 4 of these inner loops. It's gonna form a pretty consistent ring around these inner 2 loops. Okay, so here's the very first loop, and inside here are those 2 really small loops that we did, and on the outside is the half-size mesh all the way around the perimeter. I didn't quite get to 47. I didn't really. This inner loop should have been a little bit bigger, but that's okay. You can add more. I'll just add the remaining meshes that I need on the next loop that goes around. But here's where the shuttle ended up. It's right here. And so what we'll want to do is pull out about twice as much twine from the shuttle as you're going to use for the depth of the net. So say the depth of the net is 2 feet. You want to pull out at least 4 feet worth of twine. I like to pull out a whole bunch of twine because I'd rather just have a little extra than not enough. So pull out a whole bunch of extra twine. We'll leave it on the end here, and we'll cut that off the shuttle. And then you want to tie this last piece of twine right here. Tie it off. What I'll do is I'll tie it off to the very first loop that I did. Just tie it off with the double knot, and that'll basically finish this very first loop. So we're going to start the first full mesh on the outside of this half mesh that we got done. So here, this right here is that extra long end of twine. I've made it about 6 or 7 feet long. And the net here is probably going to be about 2 to 3 feet in depth. And then I've got this other line of twine here that's connected to the shuttle, and we're gonna put that loose line on the left hand side, and then take the measuring stick, and then we're going to take the very first half mesh, line it up with the bottom, or with the top of the measuring stick, and come through that first half loop with the shuttle, and then pull it tight down, and then we're going to make a loop over your left hand, come through the second loop. So that's the first loop here. Come through the second loop, and then through the loop that you just threw over your left hand, and then pull that tight. What I do is I like to kind of keep hold of the twine with my left thumb and kind of slide it up until so you can lock it in place. You don't want it to move. Then you take and throw the loop over your left hand again, and then now go through the first loop right there. That's going to lock this mesh in. That second loop that I'm doing right now. Okay, so that right there is the first full mesh, and that's it right there. So put that back in, and we go to the next loop. Go over the top of the measuring block, through the half loop, pull it tight, get it even right here, throw the loop over your left hand, come through the second one first, pull it tight, and then make a loop over your left hand, and then come through the first loop right there, and then pull it tight. Okay, so now that's the second. I'm gonna pull it apart so you can see. So those are the two meshes we just did, and you can see they're double. We'll call it double length, we'll say, as compared to the first mesh we did. And so that process just gets continued all the way around. Okay, so I weave that whole loop, the first full mesh, all the way around, and I've got to this last loop, and then there's that loose line of twine right there. So I want to finish this loop, and it's the same thing. You just come up through the loop, and then pull it tight. Get it so that half loop is right up where the measure block is. Hold it with your thumb. Do a loop around your left hand, and then come through this second loop right here. Hold it tight. This gets a lot easier, after you do it a few times. It may seem a little complicated right now, but once you do it a few times, you get the hang of it, and you go pretty quick. So yeah, go through that first loop now. After you threw a loop over your left hand, and then pull that tight. This again is the one that locks it in place. So it is necessary to do that second one. Okay, so now we've got that, right? And here's that loose twine right there. Okay, so what we do is we'll form a mesh out of this loose twine right here. This is the one that's 6 or 7 feet long. It's kind of wrapped around this right here, but it's the loose wire, or the loose twine. So we'll pull that down here, and we'll take, this is the one from our mesh right here. So what we'll do is we'll end up doing a double knot right here. Just make that loop around. And this might get a little. What I like to do a lot of times is I'll kind of bring over a couple of the loops that I've already done from the other side. Right, so that'll kind of hold it in place better. So hopefully it will. And then you pull that tight, pull these guys tight. So that's the first half of our double knot right there. And again, you want to keep these guys up here, over here with the top, right? Keep the mesh similar size, right? And then you come around again with your shuttle side, because that's the side that's easier to form the knot with. And you pull that guy tight. Okay. I'm gonna put a third loop on it just to kind of lock it in place. Okay. Pull it tight. Okay. Then now you've completed that loop, that first full mesh. So when I pull this measure stick out, you'll see that we actually ended up forming a full mesh right there. There it is. Okay. Now when you go to start again, it's the same process. Okay. This is the loose. Probably going to end up I'm going to pull that through. But this is the loose twine. Pull that all the way through. Okay, so that guy's the loose twine, and here's the one from the shuttle. So you'll want to place your measure block right there. So this is the shuttle line right there. Bring it over the top, hold it with your thumb. Bring it through the first, because you always want to go left or right, or at least I do. I'm sure there's lots of different ways to do this, but I go to left or right. So shuttle twine over the top of the measure block, underneath it, through the first loop, again, and then pull it tight. So it's the same step that we did before. It's just now we're on our third mesh. So we've got a half mesh here, and then our first full mesh. Now here's our second full mesh. So we've got that. You pull it tight. Make sure this guy's right down here. Throw it over your left hand. Come through the second loop first. Pull it tight. Over left hand again. And now the first loop right here. Pull it tight. And that's it. And you just can keep continuing it. Alright, so I'm part of the way through the second full mesh on this guy, and one of the issues that I had was that in this very first loop here, I only got 39 of the half loops that were able to fit because of the kind of the diameter of the inner loop that I did. And the landing net, the landing pole itself is, or the hoop of it has 47 screw holes in it, 47 attach points. And the way I'm going to do it is, when this net is done, each one of these ends is going to get attached to each one of the individual drill holes in the hoop of the landing net, right? So I need to end up with 47 of these guys. Right now I've only got 39 of them. And so what I'm going to do is, well, the difference between the 39 and 47, that's 8. Right? So what I'm going to do is every fifth knot that I tie on this loop that I'm doing, I'm going to add an additional loop. And how I do that is I'm going to what I'm going to do is, this is the fifth one right here, or after the fifth one. Okay, so normally I would just come through here and pull it tight, right? Okay, so instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this guy right here. This guy. So I'm going to come up through there, pull that down, right? And get it lined up, pull that down to right there. Okay? So this right here, that's going to give me my additional loop right there, but I need to attach that. I need to add some knots here and here to form that loop. So what I'm going to do is keep this thing tight. I'm going to pinch it right here, pinch this loop right here, and get a little more twine here. So I'm going to use the same knots that I did before. I'm going to throw it over my left hand, and then I'm going to come through this loop right here, through here, and through, and then tighten it. Up above it, that is. Tighten it up above. I can get it. There we go. Pull that tight. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to throw it over left hand, and I'm going to come through this first loop right here. And then pull it tight. That's going to lock that in right there. You're going to pull it tight. Okay, now that's half of it. That's half of the additional loop that I need to do. The next step is I need to tie the loop, this guy right here, to this guy right here. And I need to do it right here, so I need to have a knot right there. I'm going to use the same method to do that. I'm going to throw a loop over the left hand, come through on the second loop, pull it tight, try and keep it lined up as good as possible, throw it over left hand, and then come through the first loop this time to lock it. Pull that through. Okay, now I've got an additional loop. I just formed an additional loop in there. And now the next thing is I just continue on as normal. I take the next loop here, bring it down, or come up through it, bring it down to here. Now there's kind of a little bit of an issue right there. You can see it's kind of not perfectly lined up, not perfectly even. Sometimes you can kind of just pull down on it and kind of get it a little bit closer, but now that's going to be off just a little bit, but it's not too bad. So yeah, we just continue on with the regular process. Throw it over the left hand, come through the second loop first, and then the first loop next to lock it. That's how you do it. So I've just added an additional loop. So in the next go around, instead of 39, I'm going to have 40 loops. So I'm going to keep doing this all the way around to get the 8 additional loops that I need. And on the next go around, I will have 47 loops, which is what I want. So I'm approaching the end of this fishing net. I've taken it off of the fixed point and test fitted it on the landing pole a couple of times just to kind of get a feel for how much depth it is. And I don't think there's really a set rule for the depth of the fishing net. Anyway, so I wanted to just kind of show you guys how I do it again, kind of maybe a little bit faster, a little bit wider angle shot. Again, you go through the hoop. I'm always working left or right. Go through the mesh right there. Bring it up tight. Hold it with your thumb. Make a loop over your left hand. Come through the second loop first. Pull it tight. And then go over your left hand again. Come through the first loop. Pull it tight. And that's really all it is. You just keep continuing that through this over and over. And I'm really not very good at this, but you can kind of see that you can move fairly quickly. There are a lot of meshes, depending upon how big your net is. And then I just undo extra twine out of the shuttle when I need it. I think I could have done a better job with this shuttle. Makes a little bit of improvements to it, maybe the next time I make one. Problem with this one is, or the main problem with this one is, too much twine gets let out. When I pull it out, what I really need is, there it is right there. I need a locking end like right here on this end. Right now it's just wide open. So you can kind of see how loose that twine is right there. And a lot of times that will work its way loose and I'll end up with this long amount of twine. Really, you really should have maybe about like that amount of twine to work with, and just pull out a little bit at a time. You can go a lot faster that way. Got the landing pole, and we've got the fishing net here. And I like to start at this end of the hoop, the far end of the hoop, and I like to, we'll start right here, kind of in the middle. You run the line through. This is your twine that's at least 2 times longer than the perimeter of the hoop. I think you probably want to go more than even 2 times, because you really want to do this step in one continuous piece of twine. You don't want to really have to cut the twine and tie knots and stuff like that. So it doesn't really have to be exact, but I'm going to kind of pull out about half of the twine here. So half's on this side and half's on this side, because what we're going to do is go both ways around, and you're going to end up down here at this end of the hoop, and that's where you tie the knots, down here. You don't want to start down here and work your way all the way around, because you're going to be pulling the twine through a lot more than if you just kind of work this way and then work this way. So I'm just pulling out about half of it on each side. And so pull out back a little bit more on this side, I think. There we go. That's pretty close. Right, and then what I should have done was, I kind of messed up. I should have run the line through the first mesh right here, but it's pretty quick. That's why also it's best to just have extra amount of line. And so you pull the line through, and what I do is I will put a loop in the mesh. So just bring the line around and through the mesh again. And you want to do it consistently every time the same way. But with that loop that's in the mesh now, what that'll do is when you pull this tight, that loop right there will kind of ball up, and it's going to want to come through this hole. But we've drilled the hole around the perimeter here so that it's just big enough to fit 2 strands of twine. So that extra loop right there is just enough to form a knot that will not go through, and then you have the flexibility to really just tighten up that thing really good. It's not like kind of trying to form a knot and then pulling the knot tight. This little loop right here, you have a lot of flexibility to get it really tight. So so that's what I'll do, and I just pull that through, and that's the first one. Another trick that I do is, or that I've kind of come up with, is that what I did was I counted out the number of mesh all the way around this perimeter to get where I ended off rather with the net, and that's going to be a double knot in the last mesh that I did to make this, and there it is right there. That's the double knot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put that double knot right here down at the end, so that it's not visible in any of these other areas up here where it's a lot more visible. Put it back here, the walnut's dark color for one thing, and then it's just kind of more hidden. So it should be a little bit clearer or cleaner putting it back down there. So yeah, all I did was I just counted the number of drill holes and then worked back with the number of meshes, you know, so that the double knot will end up right there. Okay, so once you do that, once you get the first one, then you just start working over to the next one, right? We'll just take this guy right here, and we'll bring him back, pull him back through, and we'll start working him through the next hole. Sometimes you might want to, or you might need to take the little paper clip. Actually, it's this one right here. Take the little paper clip and kind of push through, because there will be a little bit of extra residue there from the lacquer or whatever you're using to kind of finish the net. So the other thing too is that I like to hit the ends of the twine just really quickly with the lighter, just to seal them up so they don't fray, because you're going to go in and out of this stuff quite a bit. And you'll want to try and be consistent with this stuff. So I came through this way. I'm going to do a loop on this. We'll call it the left-hand side with the loop that I put in there. And this is actually a quicker way to do it, is to put the loop in first, then pull it through, because it's loose enough where you can just kind of pull it through, and you don't have to, you know, pull one side through first and then the next side, and so it's a little bit quicker doing it that way. Another thing what I do is I'll just kind of rough it in, get it in there. I don't worry about getting it tight up at first. I just kind of rough it in, get them all in there, all the way around on both sides, and then I'll come back and I'll tighten them. It's just a lot harder to kind of keep everything tight, and then while you're trying to route everything through, right? So now this next part might be the tricky part, and that's where this paper clip comes in. Is that after you did the loop in that mesh, you want to come back through that same hole that we just came out of, right? So I don't know if it's going to go very easily. Look out, kitty. All right. Okay. Shit. Cat's making it difficult on me. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to go back through the same hole that you just came out of. I've used this paper clip here to kind of just drive it through. Because again, you want to make this drill hole just big enough for 2 pieces of mesh. If you don't, quite do it that way, you probably just have to do more loops through the mesh, to form a big enough knot, or you can tie a knot there and try that method as well. That'll form a bigger knot on the end of it. But the basic idea is you want to pull that tight here, and not have that the knot come through. And I'm going to flip it around so you can kind of see what this looks like, what the rest of it's going to look like when I get going with this. Okay, that's it right there. So that's that loop that we made. When you pull it tight, it's essentially a knot, and it will not come through that. It's too big to pull through. And then you just keep going with the whole process. Like I said, what I'll do is I'll rough it in. I'll loop the twine back and forth through everything, all the way through here, all the way through here, and then I will start on one end, tie a knot, and then work through and come back through and pull everything tight, and then you end up on the other end where you tie the final knot. So you can see I've gotten a few meshes tied to the hoop, and we're taking a piece of twine and working our way around the hoop through the drill holes in the hoop So you come in through the hoop, you pick up the next mesh, you go through the mesh, and then do a loop around the mesh. That loop will form a knot when you pull it tight, and that's what will lock it into the hole. So the knot itself can't go through the hole. That's how you can tighten it up, and you pull it through. You have your loop right there, and then you fish it back through. I use just a little paper clip or whatever you have to work it back through the hole. So you want that hole to be fairly tight. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get it through all the way. There it goes. And pull it through. Keep the excess slack tight as you can as you're pulling it through, and then just kind of work it till it's somewhat tight, but don't worry about it being perfect. Like you can see right here, I have some of these guys loosened up. I go back through as a second step and tighten all those up, but here we're just looking at trying to get them in there just as quickly as possible. You go all the way around the perimeter with them. Okay, so this is with the fishing net weaved into the landing pole. I've got it attached, but not fully tightened quite yet. I just wanted to get it on there as quickly as I could. These ends are not tied. This is really the last step, where you do a double knot on this end, and then you start pulling all this slack out all the way through till you get to the other side, and that's where you finish with another double knot. Right here is that square knot that I was telling you about. You can barely see it right here. That was where I finished the net, was that last knot right there. So looking good. Going to show what it looks like out a bit. Looking good. Okay, here's 3 fishing nets. Finished product. Here's I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see here.